Salamun alaikum. Welcome to another edition of Quran and Human Being, hosted graciously by the Quran-based Jummah. My name is Farouk A. Piru, and I am from Quranology Group. And the philosophy which we espouse towards studying the Quran is called existential Quranism. All this means is that when we read the Quran as a present text. We present the Quran, as it were, to the reader. The reader is you, me, and anyone who wants to open the book. So the Quran is being read to address the issues of your human existence. It is not being read as a religious text. It's not being read as a text of genealogies. It's not being read as a text for social political reform. It's simply addressing your existence. Today's edition of QAHB, or Quran and Human Being, is part 2 of the B2B reading. Last week we talked about the B2B reading, which is the Bismillah to Bismillah reading. What this means is that when the Quran is being read, it should be read from Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim to another Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Each segment between two Bismillahs represent a complete message in itself. This does not mean that if you read one segment, the rest of the Quran is indispensable. Rather, all the segments come together to make the complete message of the Quran. Last week we looked at how the Quran itself talks about the Bismillah and how it emphasizes the Bismillah as a kitab, something which is complete in itself, which is ordered. So this week what we're going to do is we're going to see examples of how the B2B reading works and how the B2B reading helps to elucidate or to make clear or to really help with the transference of the message from the Quran to you, the reader. Before that, I'd like to talk about real life examples. If you received an email from someone and the email starts with the opening, "Hi, I am so and so, I need so and so from you," and he continues to talk about it, wouldn't you like to see what happens at the end? Because after all, the email comes in a complete set of text. In the same way, if you open the book, you open and you talked about the introduction, the introduction will tell you about the topic, and then the book will continue to give arguments and expound on the topic until it comes to the end. And what about, it's just the same if you read a fiction novel. You would like to see what happens in the end if the story is interesting enough. So in the same way, the Quran helps you to see from beginning to end as a complete message. I'd like to talk about Al-Baqarah. Al-Baqarah is the longest chapter in the Quran. It's chapter 2. And Al-Baqarah actually opens with a particular topic, and that topic is Al-Falah. Falah is success, prosperity, growth, and here's how it goes. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So it starts with the Bismillah, obviously. Alif Lam Mim. ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. That is the book, no doubt in it, a guidance for those who take guard, the guarders, yeah? الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ وَيُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةَ وَمِمَّا رَزَقْنَاهُمْ يُنْفِقُونَ. Those who believe in al-ghayb, the unseen, they establish their salah, their connection with Allah, and spend out of what Allah has provided them. وَالَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِمَا أُنزِلَ إِلَيْكَ. They believe, and those who believe in what has been descended to them. وَمَا أُنزِلَ مِن قَبْلِكَ. And what has been descended to those before them. وَبِالْآخِرَةِ هُمْ يُوقِنُونَ. And they have assurance of the outcome of events. Yeah? أُولَٰئِكَ عَلَى هُدًى مِّن رَبِّهِمْ. They are those who are on guidance from their Lord. وَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُفْلِحُونَ. And they are those who are in falah. As I mentioned at the beginning, it's talking about falah now. So they are those who will prosper. They are attaining prosperity, growth, success. So this being the case, you can have this frame of mind. You can think, okay, the opening already talks about the muflihun, those who attain falah. Now, let's fast forward and see the end of this chapter. The end of this chapter, I believe, starts with verse 284 and proceeds all the way to the end, verse 286. Yeah. Verse 284 reads, "Lillahi ma fis samawati wa ma fil ard." To him belongs whatever is in the heavens and in the earth. Wa in tubdu ma fi anfusikum aw tukhfuhu. And whatever you show from inside your soul, your nafs, aw tukhfuhu, or you hide it, yuhasibkum bihillah. Allah judges with it. Allah calls you to account for it. Okay, so you can see here, whatever you have in your souls, wa in tubdu ma fi anfusikum. So the nafs is being mentioned. Now if you look at chapter 13 verse 11 and chapter 8 verse 53, the nafs or soul is directly related with your conditions. So whatever it is you have in your nafs, this will result in your living conditions, how you are in the world. This is a direct correlation. And then the ayah continues, 284 continues. فَيَغْفِرُ لِمَنْ يَشَاءُ وَيُعَذِّبُ مَنْ يَشَاءُ. Allah will, He protects whom He wills, and He will punish those whom He wills. So you can see that the end is dealing with the nafs, the soul. Then there's verse 285, which we will skip and not see in detail. Then we look at verse 286. لا يكلف الله نفسا. Nafsan, the soul, again. لا يكلف الله نفسا. Allah does not place a burden on a soul إلا وسعها, except what it beyond its capacity, except what it can bear. Yeah, so its capacity. لها ما كسبت وعليها ما اكتسبت ربنا لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا أو أخطأنا. So basically it's saying that to the soul is what it earns, and on it is what it earns. So the soul is given primacy here. It's given emphasis. So you can see the beginning of Al-Baqarah talks about Al-Falah, being muflihun, being prosperous, successful, having growth. At the end it talks about your soul. So how do these things link? This is what you need to ask yourself. And the best part is the Quran actually helps you. Take a look at chapter 91. Chapter 91 verse 7 reads, وَالنَّفْسِ وَمَا سَوَّاهَا, and the soul and what gives it order and proportion. فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا, and to its enlightenment of its wrong. Fujur is to break up, is disintegration. وَتَقْوَاهَا, and its protection or preservation. So it's talking about the soul now. قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا. Truly he succeeds, he prospers those who grow it or purifies it. قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا. So you can see the nafs, the soul, is being linked with aflah. What is aflah? It's the same thing. It's al-falah, which we talked about in the previous section. So the soul and its state of falah or growth is already being repeated in chapter 91. So there is a direct link between the opening of Al-Baqarah and the closing of Al-Baqarah. So what do you do with that? What you do is, when you read Al-Baqarah, try to observe the sections which are in Al-Baqarah. Al-Baqarah, after it talks about Muflihun, it talks about those who reject for about 15 verses. Then it talks about the call to mankind. Then it talks about the call to Bani Israel. Then it talks about the call to Alladhina Amanu, those who have believed. Then again to Bani Israel. Then again to those who believe. So there is a continuous shift in conditions in Baqarah. And then it closes with the discussion of the nafs. Why? The nafs, the soul, is directly linked with falah or growth. And chapter 91 seals it, it confirms it. So you can see from this how important it is to read Bismillah to Bismillah. Because if you read like just 5 verses and you stopped, what are the chances of you remembering this by the time you get to the end if you don't read it all at once? If you read it like once every month or once every week, then you're not going to remember by the time you get to the end. So, well, I realize that this is a tall order, but try to spend an afternoon and read from beginning to end. Because that's how it's meant to be read. It's meant to be read at one go from Bismillah to Bismillah. Then it will disclose the complete message to you from that for that particular chapter. So now let's look at another example, the example of chapter 91. Earlier we just spoke about chapter 91. Now I'll actually use chapter 91 as a more lucid example of this, I think. Chapter 91 is very short. It only has 15 verses. Very short verses as well. But it has a wide variety of topics. So let's start. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. That's Bismillah there, yeah. Washamsi wadduhaha, and the sun and its splendor. Wal qamari idha talaha, and the moon which follows it. Wan nahari idha jallaha, and the day which shows up the glory of the sun. Wal layli idha yakhshaha, and the night which conceals it. So then it continues. وَالسَّمَاءِ وَمَا بَنَّاهَا, and the sky and its construction or structure. وَالْأَرْضِ وَمَا طَحَاهَا, and the earth and its wide expanse. So for the first 6 verses, it's talking about our natural conditions. All human beings can experience these natural conditions. Allah is reminding us of these natural conditions. Why? The Quran is not a book of science. It's a book of guidance for you. It addresses your existence in the world. So it's now reminding you of the conditions of your existence. Now see what it does in verse 7. In verse 7 it says, and we quoted this earlier actually, وَالنَّفْسِ وَمَا سَوَّاهَا, and the soul and its proportion. فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا, and its enlightenment towards its disintegration or its preservation. قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا, truly he succeeds those who purifies or grows it. وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا, and truly he fails those who corrupts it or buries it. So after Allah talks about natural conditions, he talks about the soul. What is the link between the two? I'll let you decide this, because this is far too detailed for us to discuss here. But you can feel that stimulation yourself, can't you? That mental stimulation. The link between the natural setting and the soul. What comes after this? This is now verse 10. What comes after this? Let's read verse 11. كَذَّبَتْ ثَمُودُ بِتَغْوَاهَا. The Thamud people rejected because of their excesses, their tughyan, their excesses. So now the Thamud are being mentioned. إِذِ أَنْبَأَثَ أَشْقَاهَا. Verily the most wicked among them was disputed. فَقَالَ لَهُمْ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ, and the Rasul of Allah said to them, نَاقَةَ اللَّهِ وَسُقْيَاهَا. This is the so-called camel of Allah, which we need to look into as well. And it's do not, and she having a drink or nourishment. فَكَذَّبَهُ فَأَكْرُوهَا فَدَمْدَمَ عَلَيْهِمْ رَبُّهُمْ بِذَنْبِهِمْ فَسَوَّاهَا. And they rejected him they rejected the Rasulullah, and they hamstrung her, the camel. So their Lord, on account of their crimes, obliterated their traces and made them just level. فَسَوَّاهَا, level. وَلَا يَخَافُ عُقْبَاهَا, and he does not fear its consequences. It's talking about Allah. So from verse 11 to verse 15, the pattern has shifted. It's not talking about the nafs anymore. It's talking about the Thamud people. And the Thamud people, they hamstrung the camel. فَأَقَرُوهَا, they hamstrung the camel. What is this camel? What does it represent? So what does Allah first talk about? Natural conditions. Yeah, وَالشَّمْسِ وَضُحَاهَا, verses 1 to 6. he talks about those natural conditions, then he talks about the nafs, then he talks about the thamud, all in 15 verses. Very dense. Why? If we read Bismillah to Bismillah, B2B reading, these questions will stick to us. And inshallah, the seeds of the answer will be fertilized in our minds. That's the purpose of reading Bismillah to Bismillah. And inshallah, we will get the aha moment. I see the link now. You see? So that is how the Quran foregrounds and backgrounds topics. You know, from surah to surah, from chapter to chapter, from Bismillah to Bismillah sections, you can see how it foregrounds and it backgrounds topics. And you will then see a rotation of topics within the text. So that's all we have to say for today. I hope that I have impressed upon you the importance of reading B2B. And perhaps you can share your findings with us as well in this group maybe, or in our Facebook groups. And so we can talk about this reading of this B2B style reading. Many thanks for your viewership and support. I've had some very nice comments about the B2B. I'd like to thank you for it. I personally have benefited myself a little bit from this B2B style reading as well. And I'd like to thank my discussion partner, who's always helping me to find ayat which link. Thank you very much as well. And inshallah, see you next week in another edition of Quran and Human Being. Bye.